Can you make it through the underworld?
No. Yeah. So the world in the Age of the Seventh Sun series is really inspired by kind of ancient Mesoamerican cultures. Specifically, I used a lot of Maya inspiration as well as Aztec. And so a lot of the world, especially in the Jade Bones, is highly influenced by the Middle Kingdom Maya, who lived kind of in Guatemala, Belize area. And I actually got the opportunity to go down there and see some of that in person. And so much of the Jade Bones takes place in Xibalba, which is the Maya version of the underworld. And so I was really lucky that I got to actually go to one of the ancient caves that they think was the entrance to Xibalba. And so I actually got to go inside, and I did a whole blog post on it. It was one of the craziest things I've ever done in my life. You have to swim inside this cave, and you have to squeeze through rocks where literally you have to get your head just right, or else it was yeah, not if you're claustrophobic, don't recommend it at all. But it was really cool to get to see actual skeletons of sacrifice victims and actual artifacts, and to get to hear a lot of the actual history of how they developed the mythology of Xibalba, to use the history and the mythology for inspiration, but then use that as a jumping off point to create this fantasy world that really is its own world too. So
the idea for my book started when I had written this little paragraph, and inspired me to kind of start researching about kind of creation stories. And so I had run across this article that talked about in the 1960s, NASA Ames research was looking into the possibility that clay particles were actually the origin for life. And so at that point, I sort of had my one character, Adam, that was going to have something to do with this theory. And then I decided, well, who better to counter that than my main character, who works for her family's funeral home. The problem is I knew absolutely nothing about mortuaries or how the dead are prepared. And this was going to be my setting, this family-owned funeral home. So one day, coming home from the mall after getting my flu shot, isn't that how it all begins?
Always. The flu shot, the book.
Kind of,
it's really
right.
Standard, yeah.
The flu shot, yeah. So I happened to pass by this family-owned funeral home, and I thought, I don't see any cars out. I'm going to pop in and see if they would, help me answer a few questions. Because one of my biggest issues was, if I was going to write this book, I needed to make sure that a 17-year-old could work for a family funeral home. Oh. So I stopped in there, and I'm standing in the reception room, and this lovely woman came out, Claire, who's my angel, and she said, "Oh, can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm working on this young adult novel, and I have some questions." And she went, "Oh, I'm so excited. Come on in my office. Come on in." And she sat down, and I said, "Well, my first question is, how could a 17-year-old work in a funeral home?" She said, "Oh, yeah. We had this 17-year-old boy who used to work here, and he was our IT expert, and his name was Adam." And I kind of got chills. I said, and at that point in my manuscript, I said, one of my main characters' name is Adam. He's 17, and he's the IT tech for the funeral home. And she went, "Oh, goosebumps." And then she leaned in really close, and she said, "You know what? We have ghosts." So I knew I had my story.
My editor is Betsy Mitchell, and I just absolutely love working with her. She's incredible. And she, in the second book, I kept changing how many brothers and sisters one of my characters had. And I didn't notice I did that. And she caught that. And she was just like, how big is this family? And I'm like, I don't know. I need to figure that out. So just little details like that, editors can be so helpful at finding little things like that. And it's funny too, because now she teases me about how big is this family? And I'm like,
because it's the revisions, right? So yeah. People ask you questions and you're like, did I write that? Or did I not write it and think it? Or did I write it and delete that? I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
Where we're at with that detail. Yeah.
Looking at a book as a constantly growing and changing and evolving thing, I think is a really healthy way to look at it, because if you go in expecting you're going to write a perfect book when you sit down for that first draft, you're going to drive yourself crazy and never finish a book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. It took me 12 years to write this book. I mean, there were some other books in between. There's some picture books and some just a lot of different projects. But basically, I started this in 2009. And like you, Lani, I love a good metaphor. And so what I always say is that writing a novel in particular is like sculpting. You have to first gather the clay before you can shape it. And to me, those first drafts, plural, is gathering that clay. And so, I know a lot of other writers have said you kind of got to, excuse this, but barf it up on the page first, get it all out, and then you kind of see the mess you have, and it can lead you certainly into research. There was a lot of research that I had to do for this book, everything from surfing terminology to funeral terms to, I don't know, it just, how to grow walnuts, there was so many different roads that I had to go off on to get information. And like Lani, I am so, so grateful. I've been blessed with the most amazing beta readers and critiquers. I see some of them are here tonight, which I'm so grateful for. I'm also very, very fortunate. I have my editor, Abigail Simone, is also editorial. And man, she kept the faith. She kept encouraging me with this story and asking the right questions. And at one point, she had wanted me to write it in a single point of view, and I was determined to write it in alternating point of views. And I made my case, and she said, okay, go for it. And I did. And the story wasn't working. And fortunately, I won a fellowship, a grant through the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It was a work in progress grant. And it allowed me to work with an editor, Devri Walls, to kind of take a look at it and see if this, how I could switch this book to single point of view. And so I had to go back and do a major complete overhaul of that book, which involved multiple rewrites, because when you switch it from 2 points of view to single, it alters the plot. I couldn't have things happen that were happening before. So, it's a journey. I think writing any book is a journey, and some take more than others. And it was kind of a road of discovery the whole way, but I don't regret any of it. I learned so much through this book. So
we talked a little bit about the importance of reading, especially like reading the books that you want to write. If you're going to go in promising like an epic fantasy, make sure you deliver epic fantasy. Or if you're going to go in promising that it's going to be a sweet romance, don't like randomly throw a dragon in there in the middle of nowhere. And you're just like, where did the dragon come from? Why is this a dragon? Storytelling is all about eliciting emotion. My Seventh Son series started more with the idea and the world and the concept. And then I had to figure out, okay, what kind of character would create the most conflict in this situation? And so at the end of the day, I think it all comes to, you have to have both characters and plot. I think those are equally important. They intertwine. And I think you can start on either side, but either wherever you start, make sure that you pull the other one in to create the most possible conflict and the most possible emotional appeal and drive. Because again, stories are all about eliciting emotions. So like, how can you manipulate that to create the most emotional impact? Story is so deeply ingrained in who we are as humans because we learn through stories and we change through stories. And a good story, like whether it's a movie, a book, it doesn't matter. You go into it one way and you leave changed. Just as the character changes, you change as well. And I think that's true even from the writer's perspective. Stories transform you. And so for me, I just think stories are these beautiful conduits of transformation.